Last week, I posted a video about why the 787 and A350 are not direct competitors. And perhaps unsurprisingly, I received some pushback. Now, I stand by everything that I said in that video, but I do want to revisit the conversation. Because while the 787 and A350 families don't compete, it is true that each has a specific variant that's explicitly designed to do the same job. Let me explain. Now, if you haven't seen last week's video yet, I highly recommend that you go watch it before watching this one. I'll link it in the upper right. It'll serve as a really good primer for this discussion. If you're up to speed, let me give you a brief refresher. Essentially, the relationship between the 787 and A350 is one of the most misunderstood in commercial aviation. Thanks to technological similarities and aggressive marketing, a lot of people see these two wide bodies as being one and the same. However, they are not interchangeable, since the average 787 is considerably smaller than the average A350. But I also briefly mentioned in that video that a certain A350 and 787 variant do compete to some degree, and that is worth revisiting. But before I do, I want to talk briefly about a pair of completely different aircraft, the 737 MAX and the A220. These planes are fairly similar. They're both narrow bodies designed to serve regional routes. But you wouldn't really say that they're competitors, would you? The MAX unequivocally competes with the A320, and the A220 competes with the Embraer E2. But the largest A220 variant, the A220-300, and the smallest 737 MAX variant, the MAX 7, are similar. Both carry about 160 passengers, and both have a range of about 3,800 nautical miles. But while the Dash 300 accounts for 85% of all A220 orders, the Dash 7 only accounts for 1% of 737 MAX orders. Why is that? Well, it can all be boiled down to airframe optimization. Keep this in mind as we refocus our attention back to the A350 and 787, because the relationship between the largest 787 and the smallest A350 is analogous to this narrow body example. If you'll recall, Airbus directly targeted the 777 family when designing the A350. And its smallest variant, the A350-900, is a seamless replacement for the 777-200ER. They carry almost exactly the same number of passengers, and they can both fly 14 hours non-stop without breaking a sweat. Now, Boeing originally thought that even in the face of new competition, the 200ER would be just fine. Yes, demand would decrease, but it would continue to sell modestly. But that wasn't the case. The A350 completely supplanted the jet. Enter the 787-10, Boeing's direct response to the A350's challenge. While Airbus's decision to build the A350 was a proactive move to replace the 777, Boeing's decision to build the Dash 10 was completely reactionary. They were worried that without some sort of modern contention, the A350-900 would have a stranglehold on that segment of the market. The thing with the 787, though, was that it was never intended to carry 300 plus passengers. Boeing engineers and executives always intended for the 787-9, the middle child of the family, to be the sweet spot for 787 design and economics. Ultimately, any stretch of the 787's airframe would be a move away from this optimized design. While Boeing engineers did an exceptional job in building the Dash 10, it did come with some drawbacks. For one, the plane took a considerable hit to its range. It can only fly about 8,000 nautical miles. In comparison, the 200ER can fly 8,900 miles, and the A350-900 can fly 9,300. What's more, engineers couldn't figure out a way to stretch the 787 enough to quite match the A350's capacity, coming up about 25 seats short. Because of this, the A350-900 has outsold the 787-10 by a considerable margin, by a count of 760 to 211. That being said, the two have still competed. Airlines such as KLM, British Airways, and Air New Zealand have purchased the 787-10 with the explicit goal of replacing their aging 200 ERs. Meanwhile, airlines like Delta, Cathay Pacific, and Asiana have ordered the A350-900 to replace theirs. So what's the big takeaway here? Well, at the end of the day, the matter of aircraft competition isn't always black and white. Airplane variants at the margin will always have some potential for competitive overlap, even if they're from families that aren't intended to square off. But making the generalization that the A350 and 787 are direct competitors just because of similarities between the A350-900 and 787-10 is not a fair assessment. Sure, these two variants are meant to replace the same plane, but they do so in very different ways and are stemmed from very different design philosophies. And if anything, the story behind their rivalry further exemplifies that, from the get-go, the A350 and 787 were never really meant to be competitors. Now, at the end of the last video, I asked you guys to tell me in the comment section whether you were Team 787 or Team A350. And let me tell you, Team 787 showed out in force. So Team A350, where are you at? Thanks so much to my patrons for helping to make this video possible. And as always, if you learned something new today, leave a like and subscribe to keep learning. And until I see you again, don't forget to look up.